Hello, and welcome to the commentary for Goblin Issue 4. I am Solomon Mars, creator of Goblin and the 555 Saga, which Goblin is the first volume of. I'm just going to get right into the story. I will say, right off the bat, there seems to be a slight problem that I didn't notice originally when I created the books. There is a black border that is cutting through pages. Anyways, I'll just ignore it for now and talk about the book. This cover is actually just another interior page in which I removed Jeff. This is actually a page where Jeff and Amy are in the woods, and I just removed Jeff from it. And I thought it would make a good cover as well as an introduction to as far as the character Amy. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to start by sort of picking up at where I left off on the last commentary. Hopefully, you've listened to some of the previous commentaries. Where in the last commentary I was discussing logic being illegal, and with a few of the issues, I actually, towards the end, I started doing artist comments where I was getting more into the in-depth discussion of things, details, definitions, all involving the story, and in this particular issue, I went into more detail about the law of the Northlands, as well as went into a little bit more detail about red clay and the part it plays in the world. So I'll read first the passage about the law of the land, and it says, "Planet Eravana is a world almost entirely at war. The Crimson Kings first seized the throne of Aspa in the year 5626, which isn't exactly correct. They essentially seized power in 5626, but not necessarily the throne. It was kind of like they sort of started their inner circle, the battle, the war within the hierarchy, which I'll get into a little bit more detail in the actual story. Nearly 270 years ago, the true year, I actually brought my book with me that has all my factoids and things in it, my little black book that I keep. The actual year was 5628 when the first king, the first Crimson King, took the throne. He actually sat upon the throne in 5628, but their war for the throne started in 5626. So that's kind of how it goes. The current year in Goblin is actually 5896. That's this year that Goblin is supposed to take place in, where Jeff is 14. Anyways, I'll continue reading. 78% of the Northlandic region of the Central Continent, which is called Mahu, MHA-HU, Mahu, is controlled by the Crimson King. Wow, 78% is a lot. But it's not 78% of a consistent region. It's 78% where maybe about 50%, no, probably less than 50% is the far north to less than a halfway point, and then scattered regions before you hit the Northlandic-Soutlandic border. Anyways, the throne of Aspa is located in the Empire of Sands, um, or the Sands Empire. Many people live relatively peaceful daily lives despite the ongoing war all around them. Under the Crimson King's law, it is illegal to be a logic practitioner in any way. It is an offense punishable by death. Yeah, and the Crimson Kings, they're trying to run a theocracy, in which he's the divine ruler, um, and that's definitely something that will definitely be touched on more as the Crimson King plays a more definitive role in the story. So here we are with the Worm's Plight Part 2. We got a little sunlight coming through this window, which is a little unusual considering the interior of Dunburst isn't directly exposed to outside light, but there is a bit that it comes through the portholes that are located all over the city walls. And so I guess technically yes, sunlight would come through your window, considering it gets very dark in there at night. The smallest amount of light will shine through. And I just really wanted to do this particular effect. I love that. I think I say the word particular too much as well. But I just really wanted to do this effect. I love it. Maybe I wanted to maybe do a little flecks of not really dander, but just little things dancing in the light. But it was just too much. It really was too much. I'll definitely save that for something animated, instead of still images, which then might maybe look like just little gross things in the air. There's Jeff waking up, which is really great. Commenting on the fact that he hasn't slept in a bed in almost a year. He's actually been out traveling for a year, and he mostly sleeps wherever he feels he should sleep. I mean, just lay down and go to sleep, and hope that nothing drags you up in the middle of the night, or sleep in a tree, which is very difficult. Very difficult. I can tell you from trying to do it personally, it is a very difficult thing to sleep in a tree. But if you have to do it, then you do it. And hope that you don't roll over and roll out of the tree. And so, being in that discussion between Sankofa and Jeff, and wow, Jeff, he's been through a lot. You see a lot of scars all over his back. You can see the 3 scars where the blue creature from issue 2 scratched him, and it's kind of healed. He does heal, not fast, but he does heal because of Sankofa. Sankofa does know logic that can help him heal. It's something that I've never talked about, but or at least didn't talk about in these issues, but we'll talk about in later issues. And he's just commenting on the fact that Jeff's been acting a little strange, pretty much since they left Elile's village. I believe that's Shuta village. I believe that was the name of it. Jeff doesn't really want to talk about it, but it was very uncomfortable, that reality check for him, that he may not always be in control, and that it's not a game, and this is way more serious than he thought, and there are other things that I will bring up as to the reason why Jeff started distancing himself from Sankofa. There are some other things that will be brought up in issues to come. after the Red Castle arc. Yeah, definitely. Um, this issue is a very difficult issue. I was so exhausted. Just got out of school, just graduated, and um, it's really weird because for the entire time that I was look at Sank, he's kind of noticing something else is going on with him. Hint, hint. Um, for the entire time that I was in school, all we did was you just worked on art, worked on art, worked on art constantly, constantly working on art. And so um, it's a little bit different than when you're drawing and you draw a lot, but it's for fun, it's for yourself, it's just for other people, kind of entertaining other people and stuff. Um, which is what I prefer to do rather than um, art for the sake of a grade, having to perform a specific way, as far as artistically to receive a grade, a passing grade. And that's all I did for 4 years. And so it's the weirdest thing. When I graduated, my body sort of revolted. It fought back. It had been pushed so hard for 4 years trying to keep my grades high and to graduate on time, and I couldn't really draw after that. I didn't really draw for almost the entire summer. For a good chunk of the summer, I was drawing very little. Although, I guess if you look at my DeviantArt gallery for that period of time, it would suggest otherwise. It took a long time to do this book, and that's why. I just, and here's Jeff. He's like in the middle of a huge crowd of people in the bar. Very funny looking people. Oh my goodness, some of these characters are great. It is great. That guy in the background with the green shirt, his face is amazing. And so Jeff's asking, he asked the bartender what's going on. He's like, what? Didn't you hear? And he's talking about the fact that the Spectral Army, some people from the Spectral Army are coming into town early. Of course, that was a slight hint. They're coming into town early, which means that they normally come to town. Hint, hint. That's the reason why they're mining. And that's when, Jeff and Sankofa kind of realized that this particular mining town is no longer a neutral mining town. It very much isn't a mining town for the Empire of Sands. Although it's reinforced a little bit later. And he's talking about it's because of J. Mephisto being a logic user and being captured. They're coming into town. Which is something that happens. That's why I was reading the earlier passage about the law of the land. And it's because you pretty much will be executed. Sometimes on the spot. Sometimes you'll be taken back to the Empire of Sands and executed. But you will be arrested. They will come for you. If someone reports it, they will come and they will hunt you down. If you're loose, they will hunt you down. And if you've been captured already, they'll come for you and pick you up and take you away. But part of the celebration it has little to do with the fact that J. Mephisto is being taken away. It has little to do with that because he's actually well liked in the town, especially amongst the miners. That kind of is a little bit of the older story still at play, where J. Mephisto was he was working in the mines as well, which isn't in the story anymore. I slightly regret not going ahead and doing that part of the story. It would have taken another issue. There would have been 4-part. There would have been another part to the Worm's Plight mini arc, And I really didn't want to be in this mini arc for too much longer. I really wanted to get to the Red Castle arc, but I had to realize myself that sometimes you can't rush things. You can't rush and just get to the most exciting parts. Sometimes you have to actually tell the story and let its natural pacing occur. Otherwise, you can end up doing exactly what I did, and I screwed up a big chunk of the story by leaving it out. I screwed up, and it kind of made the story a little cumbersome. Um, but I'm kind of retconning that right about now and patching it. Just patching up a few things that I screwed up by jumping the gun, as it were. Um, so he's explaining that everyone's kind of celebrating because when the army comes into town, they usually take people back with them. They will actually contract miners from that town. They'll take people from that town that really want to work, and they take them to other constructions, most likely war effort constructions, like you'll probably be working fairly close to the battlefield, things like that, or maybe even working in some of the major cities or larger towns that the Empire of Sands controls, and those are very, very high-paying jobs. Like, they're high-paying to the degree that a poor village person could they could relocate their family to the city or to one of these large towns, and they would a very comfortable living. You can make a very comfortable living and retire. It would, for some people, it can be a very permanent job. And so everyone's kind of celebrating because it means that a lot of people are going to have work. Um, um, and it's a very difficult thing. A lot of people struggling for work in this world, but it's a kind of war torn world, and so things like employment would definitely come into play. And oh no, Jeff's stomach is growling. Oh, look at that face. Look at the bartender's face. Oh, I love him. Woo! Oh, and he gives him some food. He's like, "What's this?" He's like, "It's breakfast." I'm not exactly sure what that is. I imagine that it's some sort of ground up meal, like a cornmeal or something with beans in it. That's what I was thinking about for some odd reason at the time. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is, but that's what I was thinking of at the time, and that's what it reminds me of. That's why I colored it that way. I don't know what it tastes like, although my brain tells me that it has it's a mild, spicy, sweet taste, considering it's breakfast. Very filling, and gives you a nice energy boost. Yeah. So anyways, Jeff's like, no thanks. He's like, I don't need pity. He's like, he can earn his food. He's such a jerk. Just take the food. Anyways, but the bartender corrects him. He's like, no, I didn't give you that. Someone bought this for you. And Jeff's he's kind of pissed about that. Look at that face. Look at those flaring nostrils. Look like a little pig. And then and then he sees who it is, because he just automatically assumes it's some burly dude, at the end of the counter who's taking pity on him or something. This kid, and no, it's a girl. Where'd she come from? And her little pet that's on the countertop, which is a no-no. That's just not right. You don't put your pets on the countertops. I'm sure if the health inspector walked in right now, he'd shut that place down, of course. Who knows if there's a health inspector in this world? I don't know. There probably is, but he probably doesn't hang around in Dunburse. Um, yeah, you can see that guy on the right is a little offended by Mumu being there. But this is the introduction of Amy Tessura. Um, Wonderful, wonderful character. I love Amy's character. She's great. She's changed so much. Originally being in the very, very, very first incarnation of Goblin, she was Jeff's crush. He had a crush on the girl that lived in his neighborhood. Actually, she lived in his neighborhood. That just tells you where the story was. Jeff's hometown existed, and it still existed when I originally wrote the story. And she was a neighbor, and he had a crush on her, and she didn't really know until the major events of the story started happening. But all that has been obliterated. None of that story exists like that. In fact, the Amy character looks completely different. Well, not completely different, but drastically different. Oh gosh, and Jeff's just gobbling up that food. Oh, look at him. Messy, messy, messy. He eats his, he holds his spoon interesting, in a very interesting way. And then he walks off, and she's just kind of like, what? Yeah. So he leaves, and she chases after him, and she's just trying to get his attention, and he's mostly just concerned with getting out of that town. The military is about to show up. There's a logic smith. I was about to say logic eater for some odd reason. There's a logic smith known to be in the area, has been arrested, and they are not only mining for the Empire of Sands, which Jeff is opposed to, they are also mining red clay, which is very, very dangerous. That town is just a sitting. It's just, gosh, an explosion waiting to happen. Of course, they take the proper, precautions so that there aren't that many those kinds of accidents, and certainly not that many, although people do die in that line of work. So Jeff is actually is concerned. He voices his concern over the fact that Jeff might be considering trying to locate J. Mephisto. This is mostly due to the fact that Jeff does not know any other logic smiths other than, well, yeah, he doesn't know any other logic smiths at this point. It's assumed that he doesn't know any other logic smiths, and so it's kind of interesting. But he's also kind of concerned with why this guy took the blame for him, and Sankofa is telling him, no, he obviously, that was what he wanted to do. He obviously has a reason for doing it. And then finally Amy yells, "Hey!" I like that picture, Jeff standing on his tiptoes. Whoa! I don't know what's going on with Mumu's eyes in this issue. I don't know why I was drawing them so thin in this particular issue. I already created model reference for him, and they were thicker than that. I don't know. I think I kind of forgot a lot of times exactly how Mumu looked. He was like the last thing that I had done before committing to before actually going ahead and drawing this issue. He was one of the last things that I reworked. There are several versions of Mumu, And so I think I just wasn't completely comfortable yet as far as his design, and I was still playing around with ideas, but I eventually did go back to my original idea where the eyes were thicker. Um, yeah, I'm glad I did because these look really weird. Yeah, and so they're talking, and he's just really trying to get rid of her. And I love this part. He's talking about how smelly the town is, which is something I had talked about in the last commentary. How I imagined how the town must smell, and he just wants to get out of there. And some guy is like, look, it stinks. And he's trying to get rid of her, and she's just kind of tagging along, and she's he's really just he couldn't be concerned with someone that wants his help or something like that. That's Jeff, just being Jeff, very selfish, slightly one-track minded, and he just, oh gosh, just being Jeff. And now he's kind of actually facing her and talking directly to her. He's acknowledging her, really, instead of ignoring her. And then just kind of walks off. It's an interesting conversation. I definitely, I want to talk about the character of Amy. I didn't want Amy to be, and I still don't want her to be, a helpless female protagonist. I'm really opposed to the helpless female protagonist, or even honestly, helpless female protagonist, that princess sort of stereotype, where it's just someone in need of help in that sense of needing rescuing. I don't mind, like in Amy's situation, she needs a helping hand. Something, she needs help in a way that she can't do on her own. And she recognizes Jeff for what he is. And by that I mean him being a logic smith, which is something that comes up later. But I didn't want her to be helpless. Although one of the versions of her was a little bit helpless, and I originally tried to pull sort of the amnesia thing, which is really dumb. For her character, it would have been dumb. I'm not saying that the amnesia thing is dumb. If it's done right, it's definitely not dumb. But it has to be done right. You can't use that as an excuse for, piling on later abilities on a character, like giving them powers over time. You can't use that as an excuse. It's a really lame excuse, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to any creators out there that have used that as an excuse to pile on abilities as their character goes through life. They suddenly remember that they can do all this stuff. It's meh. And I was going to do it, and then I thought about it. I really thought about it long and hard, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to reduce her to that kind of character. I wanted her to be fairly well liked, but it's a really difficult thing, creating a well-rounded female character that doesn't come off as a stereotype. There are a lot of stereotypical female characters, and I didn't want her to come off as a stereotype. I wanted her to sort of reflect some of the things that I was exposed to as a child. I am the only male in my family, because my father, my parents divorced fairly early, and so it was really just me, my two sisters, my mother, and my aunt for a long time, and so I was exposed to fairly, very, confident women, and very self-sufficient women, and they took sort of very leadership roles and things like that, and it's just, I mean, that includes my both my sisters. My sisters are they're very self-sufficient, very independent, and while they're both in relationships, uh, they uh, they are they can easily stand on their own. And I admire that. I really admire that. And so I wanted Amy to sort of be that kind of character in the making. She's not necessarily that character 100% now, but she's very self-sufficient, and she's in the making. I mean, she's out on her own, and she's a junior archaeologist. And I know it really seems really strange, these really young characters roaming around on their own, but the truth of the truth of the matter is, and it's something that will be brought up later, is that again, this is a war-torn world, and a lot of people, a lot of children are orphaned in war, in times of war. It's happened even here in America, uh, and I mean, children have been orphaned because family members went off to war and were killed, or in the sense of, I mean, in the reality of sort of, I guess you would call it domestic war, gang violence, that kind of thing. You get kids that are orphaned that way, and a lot of times also join gangs themselves to seek that extended family unit. But it's the same kind of situation. And Jeff is very much that kind of child. He was orphaned. His parents were killed, and during wartime when he was younger. And Amy is actually just kind of out and on her own. She just kind of is out roaming about on her own, and she's a junior archaeologist. She's 16, and it's not so strange for her at her age to be out and about on her own. Their education system isn't as long as ours, and it's not like ours. Of course, even in our education system, you don't have to. I think you can leave school at 14, I believe. I don't know. I don't remember anymore. Oh, but so it's not so strange for them to be wandering around. And I should probably talk about the sound in the air, the humming of the arrival of the ships, the Spectral Army transport ships. And this is kind of like my first indication that there is advanced technology in this world. Because up to this point, Goblin has had sort of a old world fantasy feel, slightly steampunky, doesn't seem too advanced, but then I kind of expose readers to the fact that there are flying machines that are not propelled by they're not jet propelled, or they're not like blimps or airplanes or things like that. They're flying ships, like hovering, floating, flying, wingless ships. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting sort of introduction, and it's something that I only dropped a little bit of it in there, and then we kind of leave that alone because it's something that will be definitely discussed more as that world opens up and future issues, because that is an aspect of the Empire of Sands and the Crimson King and the Spectral Army and the Crimson Army, rather, or included. But yeah. And Jeff is just like, it's like, where are they going? And she's telling him that at the edge of town, there's actually there's the mine's end, and there's actually solid land at the edge of town that hasn't been mined yet. So, he's just like, ugh. So Amy's still pressing him to help, and he gives in. And she's going to take him on a shortcut to get to the edge of town. She's going to help him. She'll help him if he helps her. Yeah, that was silly. He was talking about how cold her hands are. Yeah, she's got cold hands. And so there's a hidden passage underneath the garbage. This was really not something planned in the story, the passage. This was a device that happened because I couldn't figure out how to get them from the inside of the town to the edge of town, and do it without a lot of I guess I hate to use the term visual exposition, but without showing, we're on a hike, and showing pictures of them. Oh, we're going over this hill, and I didn't want to draw the interior of the city anymore. I was really sick of the city. The textures that I was using for the city took quite a while to do for each page, and I was kind of getting tired of looking at the same color palette, which happens sometimes from issue to issue. If I'm on the same color palette for too long, I have a tendency to just kind of get tired of it. And I don't know. I assume that this happens to other artists too. When you use the same color palette over and over and over, your body, you just kind of become numb, and just kind of it's starts becoming bland, and you get bored with it. And so I try to change it up, definitely. In the books, I try to change up the color palettes, not only for the sake of making the book interesting to look at, but also to maintain my sanity. So really, this tunnel was a device for that. I just needed a quick way to get from point A to point B, and I do that a lot. I will just cut an entire scene that that plays out in my mind when I imagine the story. I'll just cut an entire scene for the sake of sparing readers as well as myself having to go through all that. Yeah, it's a little muddy down here, but it's a straight shot. Jeff complaining about his shirt that he didn't like in the first place. He was complaining about how itchy it was only a few issues ago, and now he's complaining about it getting all messed up. And Amy talking about, we can just get you a new one later. But yeah, it's pretty muddy down there. In retrospect, I should have done this scene a little bit different. I tried to show the entrance of the tunnel where they came down and went through, but really, I didn't have to show that. I could have just, pulled in a little bit closer on this picture, and shown them kind of walking, creeping through the mud, crawling rather through the mud. That is some really clumpy mud. Look at how it's just clumped up on his sleeve. Gross. And this is one of my favorite pictures, where they came out at the edge of town, and they're overlooking this mansion that's down at the base of this hill, down past these trees. And there's this beautiful little mansion, and I mean beautiful as in color. It's a very strange design, but it's my kind of design. I like I said before, I like organic structures. I don't like straight, like um, linear structures. Um, I like organic structures, and at the time I was studying a lot of things about like fungi, mushrooms, and things like that. I had a lot of books on those kinds of things, and so I was creating structures that kind of look like mushrooms and just fungi, and growth like that, just very organic and wonderful. And I like the color of it too. It's this nice um, gradient. Oh, I have to sneeze. Um, hmm. And Amy talking about. Oh wow. I'm not gonna cut that. Amy talking about her friends being held there. Talk about her friends a little bit more, and Jeff noticing a mansion. He's like, "What's the mansion doing there?" And she's talking about how a long time ago it was actually a noble house. The town was founded by people, and I think I mentioned this in the last commentary. And the people, part of the people that founded the town and probably most likely started the initial mining of the area, became very wealthy, and over time became nobility, and so that this is kind of a house that was once uh, a part of a family of a noble family, and probably long since gone. And I mean by that I mean like their particular family line is no longer existing, which happens. Um, and now it's sort of a place where a bunch of industrialists, sort of merchants, that run the mining operations of the town, and other operations in that town, other merchant operations in that town, actually meet. She says it's their clubhouse, and they're discussing the fact that the mining is actually for the Crimson King's war campaign, and she's like, yeah, they kind of sell to the highest bidder, and the Crimson King pays very well for red clay, because he wants to control all of the Northlands. In fact, he wants to control both the Northlands and the Southlands, but that's a story for another day. And she's talking about there are rumors that they even sell to MonsterKind, which is interesting, but that's something that we'll actually get into later. That's a story detail that I doubt anyone would even think about until I bring it up again later, and I will bring it up again. So remember that. Yeah, and then there's some sound coming from the side. What is that? Something comes out of the brush. What is that? And Amy's like, what kind of animal is that? And Jeff's like, that's no animal. It's not. It's a mercer. Oh, gross. It flips over and it opens up its mouth. And blah! It's this giant tentacle, this extending tentacle whip comes out. And Jeff, he kind of knocks Amy out of the way just in time to avoid getting lashed by that thing. It's very gross, covered in some sort of weird lubricant, not necessarily drool. It's an organic robot, I guess. It's sort of an organic machine. And I'll get into more detail about Mercers and where they come from in later issues. Yeah. But yeah, like that. Jeff, they landed on the ground and she's squishing me. Ah! And yeah, gosh, that thing. I focused a lot on that tentacle tongue thing. I just the idea of getting hit by that thing is just so gross because it comes out, this long thing comes out of such a small vessel, but it's kind of I don't even know how to explain how it works. I guess it's best that I don't explain how it works, and we all just kind of accept that it works. Uh, some of the technology in this world obviously is based on dreams, and so things are very, very unusual. But hey, um, yeah, Jeff's gonna fight it, and Amy thinks it looks stupid. And then she's like, no, we're not going to fight this, and she's not going to run away. Jeff was like, treating her, he is treating her like a girl, quote unquote, like a girl, and was like, oh, you should leave, I'll handle this. And she was like, what? Get out of here. And she throws, what are they called? They were called, I forget what they're called. I forget what the name of the seeds are. She mentions what they are, but and they let off like this little poison that causes an allergic reaction in the kidney seeds. That's right. It causes an allergic reaction in this little Mercer, and his tongue starts swelling up, and so it's essentially choking. Even though it doesn't breathe, it's kind of choking because it's kind of swelling. The organic parts of it are swelling inside, and I really wish I hadn't used this sequence like this. I wish I had changed Amy and Jeff, but I was being lazy and I only changed the Mercer, and then pop, it dies. It explodes and dies. And Jeff's like, oh, that was amazing. Where'd you get those? And she just kind of laughs. She won't tell him. It's just one of those things that she picked up as she was traveling, and definitely another thing. I know I keep talking about all this stuff that I'm going to talk about in future issues, but yeah, it's another detail about Amy that will come into play later. Oh no, they have to duck down. Rune claws. They see something over in the rune claws are talking about stuff in the distance. And yeah, they see the little Mercer that's just been killed. This one guy here actually makes a very stupid comment. It says, like one of the guys says, they're talking about the escaped logic user. This was my way of hinting at a story element that I took out, and I really shouldn't have taken it out, but this book was long enough as it was, and I didn't want to break the story, the mini arc, into another issue beyond the one that takes place after this and stuff. I don't know. I'm thinking about it now, but it's fine. What happened was I was hinting at the idea that J. Mephisto escaped. Since he's really the only known logic user, they don't know that Jeff is a logic smith, a logic user, and so he makes the comment. You think it was the escaped logic user, and the other guy says, "Has to be, sir. An average person couldn't do this, not even to a small model like this one." Which is really dumb considering Amy just did that. And she's not a logic user. She's not a logic smith. So there are methods. I mean, he's kind of underestimating. But that's kind of, the stupidity of the rune claws. They underestimate everyone. Their tactics are not the same tactics that other people will use. But of course, if they use the kinds of things that Amy uses, they'd be really dangerous. Far more dangerous than they are, because they are pretty dangerous. Mostly because they were kind of ruthless. So they're whispering about, they're whispering to each other, and it's me hinting again at J. Mephisto having escaped. Amy didn't know his name, whereas Sank and Jeff do, or at least they know him as Mr. J. Up, and wow, the woods are just crawling with rune claws all over the place in their little bird masks. um, and I actually kind of started enjoying creating the forest and the bushes and things like that. I usually don't like creating forest scenes because I always have a problem with depth, making several layers so it looks like a deep forest. And also the idea that, if you run around in a forest, it's more than just trees. There's shrubbery and small plants and things like that. Rocks that stick out of the ground, and I always forget to include those. And so I end up with just a bunch of trees. And so I've been working hard at remembering that there are more than just trees in a forest. Even in a simple wooded area, there are more than just trees. And Amy swearing that she doesn't work for the Rune Claws. And Jeff's like, no, that's not what I was thinking. And he asked her if she had more of those the kidney seeds, and she's like, no, but I have some smoke pellets. And he's like, what are you doing? And then you see that she has her hand shoved in Mumu's mouth, and this is like Sankofa notices, jumps up on Jeff's shoulder, and he's like, incredible. Her pet is it's the pronunciation is melono grub. Melono. Melono. Of course, I guess you could call it a melano grub if you want. A melano grub if you really want. But the way that I pronounce it is melono. Melono. Melono grub. Anyways, and he hasn't seen one of those in more than 100 years or so. And we definitely talk a lot about Mumu in later issues. But yeah, he is a well of wonder and awesomeness. I love Mumu. He's awesome. And he's always happy. I love that. Well, almost always happy. There have been a few instances in this arc, in this mini arc, that he frowned a little. Yeah. And Amy is noticing Sankofa for the first time. And he was invisible, but he's no longer invisible. He's like, I'll explain later. Introductions are interrupted because, some of the wandering Mercers have found them. I love this. It's such a weird thing to say. It's like, quick, throw those smoke pellets and climb on my back. What? Do it now! And it really is kind of a weird thing for someone to say. I mean, what do you say to that? If someone tells you to throw down some smoke pellets and then climb on their back, what? And so, she's just kind of like, what? But they've both been kind of freaking each other out. It's just been a series of events of just, freaky revelations. And she throws him down, and, that guy kind of reacted strongly to what he thought was explosives, and it's just smoke pellets. And they figure they're just some kids from the town, which is lucky for Amy and Jeff that they think they're just kids from the town. Because if they realized they weren't kids from the town, they would probably capture them and interrogate them, try to figure out what their deal is. So they're up in the trees running around. Jeff is like a little monkey boy. He just likes climbing and jumping and crawling and stuff. And really, it's just me. Me and my friends climbed trees. We ran around. We didn't jump from tree to tree. We did jump from branch to branch, but not from tree to tree because we were never, at least I was never confident in being able to determine if a branch on another tree could hold my weight if I jumped from one tree to the other. And I seriously doubt it would have been able to. Yeah, I probably would have hurt myself, seriously. Although several of my I've watched people fall out of trees, including my little sister. I won't tell that story because it's very embarrassing for her. There's one particular story, and I'm not going to talk about it. She fell out of a tree at my grandmother's house once. Um, uh, and myself and my cousin were witness to it. Anyways, let me stop. I'm going to stop talking about it. So he's like, give me your pistol. The guy's name apparently is Adrian. I mentioned that a few of the rune claws had been named. I gave them names early on. This guy's name is Adrian. So he gives him his steam pistol, and that's the thing. They use steam pistols. They don't use gunpowder. They use steam power. It's a little cartridge. It's sort of like a CO2. Those kind of guns, the little pellet guns or stuff like that, where they use the CO2 cartridge. It's the same concept here, and it's a CO2 cartridge. This is actually an element that I use in a couple of stories. I like steampunk, and so I use steam-powered pistols a lot. And so that's what it's a little compressed. It's a little cartridge of a specific kind of compressed. It's not like compressed air. It's something very specific that works with the gun, and that's probably something I'll get into more detail in the Goblin data book on DeviantArt, and not necessarily in the books. It's just kind of because it's not an element that I really care about enough to talk about. It's not something that the characters are in awe over. It's definitely something unusual. It's not a normal thing. Like he comments on it. She says, "Oh, they have a pistol," and he's like, "Oh, they must have gotten that from the army." Because in this world, a pistol is it would be very expensive for your average person, even a rune claw, to get their hands on one unless they stole it. It's a very expensive weapon. It's very rare to see with regular people. It's very rare for them to have pistols, and so usually, if they have any sort of pistol, even larger pistols, which show up later in the story, in later issues, it's still rare. It's still something where if you see it, pretty sure it's there. Somebody paid a pretty penny for it, which are not. Yeah, somebody paid a pretty penny for it. I mean, I was going to go into a story about the money system in Goblin, but I'm not going to go into that. Yeah. So they decide to go way out, and then circle back to the mansion to lose the rune claws. And then Amy notices something down on the ground level. So they go down, and it's a mine elevator, a very simple mine elevator. Kind of, really, it's honestly a one-person mine elevator. It's not that thing. It's just not constructed very well. It's really intended for only one person to ride the elevator. But of course, there's two of them. And they're talking about how it shouldn't be on the edge of town, and it really shouldn't. Not at this point. The majority of the mines are in the center of town, and pretty far down. But they're all at the center of town, so this one's a little suspicious. And they notice that it's been used recently. The little motor on it. She calls it an engine, but the motor on it is still warm. So they know it's been used. And of course, Jeff, in his own little Jeff style, kicks it to get it running, because he's just a jerk. And then they step on, and it's just filthy. Look at that. It's really filthy. And it comes down. Oof. And they get off, and they're walking through, and Jeff and Sank are talking about these particular lamps, and the glow that's in them. It's kind of an unnatural kind of. It's creeping Amy out, and we talk more about what that is later. And at the time, um, Jeff and Sank are um, talking about it. Initially, he didn't know what it was, and he kind of figured it out as time went. As time went on, he figured out what it was. But it took him putting a few things together. He had to put some things together as this and the next issue go on. But yeah, and then they noticed. And this picture, there's some weird stuff going on with this picture. It kind of got warped a little. I guess in the compiling process, in the aligning and stuff, did some really weird warping, and so the picture is kind of squished, and their heads look really long, like football heads. Yes, and I show the first Doma of the Enlightened, or Doma of the Enlightenment, and this is the first one that I ever show in the series, and it's lit up all over by these lamps that are just kind of hanging all over the place. And there's been some excavation, obviously, and they're talking about it, and it's just amazing. It's very, very pretty. I really enjoyed creating the texture on this. Man, I can't even explain how many layers on one rock. How many layers there are. But I put a lot of time, because this is how I saw it in my head. It's really beautiful, sort of marbleized stone, and I wanted to really get that across. I didn't want to do any shortcuts and talk about how pretty it was. I wanted to show it, and I tried my best to reconstruct what I saw in my head. I think, and I really enjoyed the end result. And this is Jeff, talking about, this is a Doma of the Enlightened. Back in the day, logic users. And it's just like, I know what a Doma of the Enlightened is. And it's just like, let's just go. And that's because she's a junior archaeologist. And this is her field of interest. One of her fields of interest is everything about logic and logic saints, logic smiths, just the world of logic and logic users, which is actually rare. To find someone and that's their field of interest is rare in this day and age, because it's been outlawed for the most part, so people are kind of afraid. I mean, you don't really get funding for this, but hey. And he's like, yeah, that's a good point. He's like, why do you know about Domas? And she's like, it's like, yes, are you a logic user? And she's like, no, but you are. And it's like, what makes you so sure? And she's like, and I actually like these particular scenes, because they're just kind of, it's sort of mixing the mundane with sort of the fantastic. And that's one of those things that I like, kind of mixing things. And them walking around, they're just kind of walking around having a conversation, but walking around amongst these really beautiful ruins. And he asks, how she knows that he's a logic smith, and she tells him, you're pretty much advertising it to the world, and it has to do with the specific gauges that logic smiths have, and it's something that you'll notice amongst all the characters that are logic smiths. They're of a specific style of gauge. It looks a certain way. It's actually, it's about I guess some people would call it a zero gauge, but I would call it it's an aught gauge or a double aught gauge, which is like, what is that, like 8 millimeters or 10 millimeters. It's a sort of an earplug, but it's not hollow. It would be hollow, but it's a hollow gauge with another plug inside of it, and the plug inside of it actually is cut like the head of a screw, or like a flathead screw. Like it's just a single groove, a single notch that's cut into it, and that's how their particular those specific plugs are for a logic smith. And that's a tradition amongst logic smiths, logic saints. When they've actually gone to school. It's a tradition amongst ones that have learned at a Doma of the Enlightened. That's something that they learn. I mean, that's something that it's sort of kind of a something that's given to them when they've passed a certain level. It's sort of an It's sort of not necessarily an initiation, but sort of a final initiation into apprenticehood. And so yeah. And so she just comments on the fact that only logic saints and their apprentices wear that particular style of gauge, and because there are lots of other people in the world that do have them. You'll see it throughout the series. There are people that have very large piercings, some that don't. Amy had just very basic ear piercings. You see, and I try to stay consistent with all of the logic users, all the logic smiths in the series. I make sure that they all kind of have that same design in their ear piercings, and different colors, which mean absolutely nothing really. It's just that their personal choice. But it's a gift, and so you take it. It's kind of a sacred gift. It's something special, and it's usually a sign that that particular logic smith has had proper learning. They're not just someone that kind of went out and did it on their own. They have actually been to school to learn from a teacher. And yeah, even Jeff has. And that's something that, again, is something that will be talked about in later issues, actually coming up really soon in the issues that I'm actually currently at, which is around 11, 12, and 13. And that's something that they talk about there. And I don't know, he's just so used to having them that he didn't even think about the fact that some people would recognize him as a logic smith because of them. And for the most part, people don't. You can walk around out there in the open, and no one really recognizes it because it's such an old tradition, and logic is something that has been forced out of the public consciousness. So people don't think about it. A lot of people don't remember. Some people do, like Amy, obviously, but she studies this kind of thing, so she would recognize that, which is why she asked Jeff specifically for help. She knew a logic smith maybe could help. And she's talking about she doesn't hang out with thieves, because Jeff's like, I can steal these. Because that's the only other way that you would get them, is if you stole them. You could easily steal them off a dead body, which is really the only way that you could get them. Unless maybe, I guess, now that I think about it, unless you were digging around in, maybe if you found an old abandoned Doma of the Enlightened, some old ruins or something like that, and you were digging around and you found some, and you cleaned them up, and you would have to find someone that was willing to put them in. But I guess, yeah, you could. But yeah, so they're I guess, they're fairly normal size. Yeah, but you definitely have to be dedicated. It's definitely a level of dedication for them. And is Jeff just kind of like dealing with Amy, who has kind of not necessarily befriended him, but she's so nice and so carefree that she's just kind of like, she knows he's not necessarily a bad guy, you know? She can tell that he's not a bad guy. And so they're just kind of, he's just like, whoa, 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 you know, he doesn't want to make friends. But yeah, he didn't even know her name, and so she introduces herself, and he introduces himself, and she's just kind of staring at him, being completely silly. She's a ridiculous character, a ridiculous girl, but fun. She's awesome. And so they finally get to the through all the ruins and get to the center of the Doma, and it's just wow. And they can see all the incantations all the way that would normally encircle. They be across the entire actual building. They would line the walls all the way around them, 360. But since most of it is crumbled and has been destroyed, there's really only about this one side of the wall that still exists undamaged. She comments on how small it is, but it's not an ordinary Doma of the Enlightenment. It's definitely not normal. They normally you wouldn't find incantations on the walls like this, not to that degree, and certainly not even like they have them on the doors. They're on the walls. They're on everything. And that's because it's really they're containing something. They were trying to contain something. And that's what they're talking about in here. They were probably more than likely containing a logic artifact. And it's sort of it's something that actually comes up later. It's there are different sort of different incantations that you can do for binding, and like there's one that I discuss. I bring up in I think the next issue actually, called Steady Holding, which is one of the most simple incantations you can do, and this is like that times 1,000, and you can tell. And she's talking about how you can tell because the script is painted on the walls in sort of a close knitting. They're very close together. Like each line is really close together, and I'm not sure if I don't remember if I really showed it in some of these, but normally what I would have done is between the spaces between two lines there is a smaller line of there's a smaller incantation in between the space of larger lines of incantations, and that's to reinforce the binding. And I know I'm sure that there are some scenes where I've shown it. I'm sure there are some, and if I see them, I'll point it out. But and Amy's talking about how she can hear the incantation. It's whispering. She's like, it's damaged, but it's pretty powerful. And Jeff doesn't hear it. But it's sort of like a vibrating. It's sort of, the room is sort of vibrating. It's like a humming. It's kind of, I liken it to, if you walk into a room, or if you're in the opposite room that a television is in, and you can faintly hear the humming, a high-pitched humming of a television when it's on. And that always bothered me. But it's sort of that same kind of sensation where it's not something you really hear. Her saying that she can hear it whispering isn't true. It's not a true whisper, but it's sort of this faint sort of humming, this vibration. And Sankofa is he's just explaining to Jeff that some people are more sensitive to it than others. And the thing about it is you don't have to be a logic smith to be sensitive to logic because it is the basis of the universe. Logic is the language of the universe. It's sort of like how they say mathematics is the language of the universe. That's kind of what this is about. It's kind of that sort of same idea. It's ancient sort of thing. It is the universe, and so people are just people are sensitive to different aspects of nature and in our reality as well as this reality. So Jeff just needs to really learn to be more sensitive to these kinds of things in order to feel it. It's just a matter of practice, and he's not. um, he's not. He's just not a very good student. Yeah, and this is Amy, her the archaeologist in her coming out. This is an amazing piece of history. Oh wow. And whoa, somebody comes crashing through one of the doors, completely destroying that door, and not only that piece of history, but the incantation that was on that door, which was already ruined anyways. But yeah, and oh, it's him. I love that picture. And it turns out it's Jay Mephisto, who obviously did escape. He escaped. And this was part of that thing that I was talking about where I wanted to explain. The part of the story that was left out was Jay Mephisto escaping. The reason why, not escaping, but the reason why he let himself be captured was so that he could get to this area. He needed to get to this area to find this particular artifact that he has. And the only way that he could get to that area, he couldn't figure out where the mine was. So he let himself get captured by the Rune Claws, and the Rune Claws took him over to the mansion where the military was supposed to pick him up. And he escaped, and he found the ruins down here, this mine. And I left that part out. Probably would have helped a little bit in sort of fleshing out the story a little bit more. But like I said, this particular issue is it's so full. And I was already growing really sick of this mini arc. So that's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing to rush a story and to get sort of turned off by your own work, sort of disgusted by your own work. Really, if you ever find yourself in that position, really just walk away. Just walk away from it. Find something else to draw if you really want to draw or work on something else. Work on something else, and come back to it later when you're feeling a little bit better. And that's something that I had to learn. I had to teach myself that. And occasionally I ignore it, and I more so ignored it in the beginning when I first started doing Goblin, because I initially was trying to do full issues on a monthly basis, and it wasn't working because I hadn't really gotten to a point where I was able to do the books fast. Like I wasn't able to draw them fast or color them fast. I hadn't created a schedule for myself in creating it, and so they would always take like almost 2 months to finish one issue, and it was because they went well over 100 pages an issue, and I just go just thinking about that, and that's why I eventually went into the bi-weekly format, because it allowed me to put out issues a little bit more frequently while there are less pages per upload. they the combined parts. There are two parts to each issue. They essentially are the same as one of these books, and it takes me less time to do them. Mostly because I've created a schedule, and I've just kind of at this point I'm a little bit better, faster. Um, I'm more comfortable with the characters, with the scenarios, with everything. But yeah, you kind of see him peeking in at this artifact that he's uh, found somewhere deep within this Doma of the Enlightened. Um, and he notices, he lets them know that he's aware of them. He can actually hear them whispering. It's this big, empty, domed building. Voices bounce off, even whispers bounce. And they're just like, ugh. And they're arguing amongst each other, Ugh, look at them. And as they're arguing, something creeps out from the shadows. And he notices it on the other side of the room. His big green eyes. And you can see that he has the piercings too, of a logic smith. I like his hair is actually a little bit better in this issue than it was before. That's a really interesting side profile of J. Mephisto. Yeah. And oh no, it's a Mercer, and it's a little bit bigger. He's got like little elephant leg like looking things there. The eye on it is bigger. Oh, gross mouth. This one has a mouth, unlike the other one. And it's really aggressive. And Jeff he picks up Amy and just jumping through the air. But it chucks a rock right at him. Just a piece of the rock that it grabbed. And knocks Jeff right out. Oh, and that's just one of those things that I would do. I did back then, experimenting. That's one of the reasons why I chose the Flash format, is because I could do things like that, like a blackout sequence. I love that I have that ability. While you can do it in a vertical comic book where a six, about your traditional vertical comic has about 6 panels per page or so, 6 or less, and you can do a blackout sequence in there, but I personally feel it doesn't have the same impact when you can look to the left of that panel and the right of that panel and you can see other things. Whereas if the comic suddenly goes black, it's like, what just happened? And you have to kind of advance through the rest of the book, and you're like, oh, and then he wakes up, and when he wakes up, it's like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And there's a dead Runeclaw next to him, and he wakes up to see that everyone's fighting. What's going on? Amy's over here. She's got a dagger that she's picked up off of one of the Runeclaws, and she's fighting against this really big guy. And then Sankofa comes in, pow! And this whole time, while Jeff's been out cold, the Runeclaws showed up, and so everyone's fighting. It's the Runeclaws, Amy, Sankofa, and J. Mephisto, and a couple of Mercers. There were actually about 2 of them, I think there were. And so, Jeff's just kind of taking it all in. He's just kind of confused. And this is, again, me doing this on purpose, kind of making it so that the reader is experiencing the book they're experiencing the events at the same time as the characters. And so you were knocked out when Jeff was knocked out, essentially. And you're exploring this as Jeff is exploring this. And so I kind of want people to be kind of confused about what's going on, just like he is. And so Sankofa is kind of explaining the situation, that the Runeclaws kind of followed them from the woods. They tracked them, and that guy with the pistol is shooting. He's just crazy. He's a lunatic. He's just shooting. And so, Sankofa tells him, we pretty much, there's only one way that they're really going to be able to, to stop the rune claws. And Jeff's just like, I don't know. Look at those eyes. I don't know. Really squinting hard there. He's got really big eyes and they're squinting really hard. He's just, I don't know. And Sankofa's like, look, I understand. He's like, all right. And Jeff's like, he wants to be in charge. He doesn't want him hijacking his body ever again. So you can see him in the corner there putting Sankofa on, which is really weird to see him doing that. I've never really shown that happen. I never really thought I would ever show that, and I actually did. I felt it kind of necessary for this little issue. And so you see him there. You see kind of Jay Mephisto in the background kicking a Mercer with his foot and setting it on fire and tossing a rune claw over his shoulder. And then Jeff kind of stands up and turns around. And this is one of those things I was talking about in an earlier commentary, where people reacting to seeing Jeff wearing Sankofa as a hat, and wow, and how strange that is for people. Even a logic smith, that's strange, and it just completely caught that guy off guard enough that Jeff just cracked him over the head and split his mask open. And you see Jay Mephisto kind of holding off the Mercer with his foot and setting it on fire. And I love how it's squishing, the mouth of it squishing up against his foot, and it's drooling. And even Jay Mephisto is like, what the? And he's like, he was about to say, is that kid wearing that Sprite? But and Amy, everyone is just kind of like, what is going on? And Amy was caught off guard, and oh no, she's been stabbed. Oh! And Jeff's, no! And he's choking this guy. Oh my God. And Jay Mephisto even sees it from his side of the room, and there's a rune claw back there sneaking up on the artifact that he dug out. And he turns around and he sees him. He's like, get your hands off! Pow! He got shot. Ugh. And the rune claw runs off after shooting him. What a coward. He shot him and ran. He's a coward to shoot him, and then he's a coward to shoot and run. Oh, there it is again. There's another of those tasers. I guess probably most of the rune claws carry them, but they were definitely equipped with them. It's not something that they would normally carry, but in this town, it's what they carry as law enforcement, quote unquote, law enforcement, hired by the local merchants, and shocks the mess out of Jeff. And I love how you can see like Sankofa's flame kind of spazzes out at the shock, and boom, knocked out again. That's actually a 2-panel sequence of black, and it might have messed with people when I initially loaded it. Some people had made some comments, and I think they thought pages were missing, and didn't realize that it was supposed to be a blackout sequence. Yeah, sorry. I was really hoping that people would have gotten it, and then we just cut to something else going on. And it's this old man talking with someone. And they're talking about the mining and doubling the shipments on his next visit. And we see for the first time, it's the introduction of the character Pinion, who is a general at the very top of the Spectral Army. He is very much in the court of the Crimson King, which I'm just realizing upon saying that is, I believe, an album. Oh my goodness. And so he's just talking about how they'll be well paid for the extra effort and stuff. And they're talking about the old man is just asking him about the logic user. from town, and he's talking about several of his men were searching in the woods for him, and they're sure to want compensation for having to deal with him, and he's talking about Jay Mephisto and how he escaped, and Pinion is he's not concerned with that. He wants the shipments of red clay and stuff. He wants red clay shipments on time, and he wants them doubled for the war effort. And it's like it's not a top priority, and he's like he refuses to spend another coin on the idiotic mercenaries he's hired, and then he tells him if the logic smith returns, kill him on sight. And then he talk about offenders of Northlandic law will not be tolerated. No offender. He says, yes, sir, I understand, sir. And you see him going over to one of those ships, and you can kind of see some barrels in there, some containers that are inside the ship. There are a few containers in that one, and the old man's like, does he know? And then you see the ships, they kind of lift off, and he's like, it doesn't matter. And I kind of leave off on a kind of a mysterious ending. He's like, it doesn't matter. Tonight, he will change the world. It's like, oh my. And I definitely wanted to talk about the role that red clay plays in the story. This particular guy he's one of the merchants, one of the industrialists that runs the area. He's, kind of a wealthy fellow. And you can tell by the patterns on the material that he has. But I wanted to talk about red clay and something that I had actually written in the issue was red clay can make a person very wealthy on Eravana. It is a very dense, combustible material that is used not only as a source of fuel, but also as ammunition. Much of the war on the outer edges of the Northlands are simply for control over red clay mines. Mining red clay is very dangerous because it lets off small electrical discharges, such as the small taser weapons used by the Runeclaws. If exposed to large amounts, red clay can be fatal, which is why they use Feru gas, and it's pumped into the mines. It's kind of poisonous, but it's also volatile. It's explosive. It is a natural plant-based chemical, Feru, and that is non-lethal to mankind, but keeps the unrefined red clay from discharging and possibly exploding during the mining process. Most red clay miners get paid very well, but it is hazard pay, as your first day at work could be your last. And it's true. And so that is the end of this issue. Goblin issue 3. Issue 4, I'm sorry. In my mind I was somewhere else in an older issue. Goblin issue 4. The second part of the Worm's Plight mini arc. So thank you for sitting through another one of these commentaries. I hope they've been enjoyable and kind of informative up to this point. I know I talk about a lot of stuff that's supposed to happen in future issues. I talk about a lot of stuff that I took out of the issues that can be frustrating. And I talk about a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily in books, but could be in the Goblin data book, which is on DeviantArt. You can actually find a link to that on my DeviantArt page, which is, I guess you can just Google Smars at DA, and you will probably find me. But there is actually a link to it on my DA page if you've never been there. I suggest going there. There are a lot of things there, from character profiles and to other things, other items, and just little details about the world of Eravana and the 555 saga and the Goblin universe. So thank you, and okay.